So here's something pretty odd. So Dusty Smith from Cult of Dusty, I'm sure you guys know him. He's a pretty OG YouTuber at this point. And he has been making content fairly consistently. Now he picked a fight with Breadtube. If you don't know what Breadtube is essentially an amalgamation of all of the various socialist left-wing channels that exist. Some of the biggest names: ContraPoints, PhilosophyTube, Shaun, Hbomberguy, etc., etc. Right? Those are the big folks. And then there's a ton of tiny Breadtube channels. Okay, there's a big tree of like people with 5K subscribers, people with 1K, people with 30, and there's just this really big spectrum in terms of subscriber counts. So Dusty sent out a tweet saying, "Breadtube, eat the rich." Meanwhile, nearly every one of the top content creators they most frequently feature and support is making enough to put them in the top 1% of American incomes. So he's doing this really weird thing of like basically saying the Breadtubers are the four people. So he's focusing on like four people here. Those folks probably being Shaun, ContraPoints, PhilosophyTube, and Hbomberguy, because they're the ones who make the most. And he's like focusing in on these four people as like, look, this is a problem. It's a very odd thing to do. Seems very random. Seems kind of pointless, to be honest with you. But what he doesn't really seem to understand here is that, first of all, when you're talking about eating the rich, you're talking about people with net worths of millions upon millions of dollars at the very least. You're talking about the Jeff Bezoses of the world, as well as people with, $100 million net worths, etc., etc. And also, our wealth inequality is so massive now that being in the top 1% of American incomes, you're probably earning, like 400 something thousand a year. And I don't know if that's pre-tax dollars, but when you're talking about people who are like, really fucking our society, it's not those people. You're talking about your Jeff Bezoses of the world, etc., etc. So it seems very odd. Now, one thing is, I'm not a socialist. All Breadtubers are socialists. Shaun sent out a tweet saying, "I can only speak for myself, of course, but the reason I have Patreon revenue private is because of people who do not know the difference between revenue and income. The amount you see on the site is not the income of the creator. Even my videos, which are light on the production side compared to those with sets and costumes, have production costs. For my video about transphobia, I paid 6 different people who helped me with it. For instance, I paid for script editing, for art, sourcing papers, general administration, and other things. Some creators have regular assistants they work with, and for people who have sets and such, these costs are higher. Your income is what you have left after these costs. This is tiresome to explain to everyone who assumes you make a lot more than you actually do, doubly so for people who are hostile about it, hence the privating. Not to mention service fees, currency conversions, and so on, plus all the unpaid work you have to do to get to the point where you're even being paid at all. Not that I'm not getting by okay, I am now, which is handy since I'm currently in Norway and everything is expensive here. Anyway, revenue is not income. Creators make a lot less than you think. Support smaller creators. Thank you." So that's Shaun responding to Dusty's criticism here, basically saying that they make a lot less than you think, and I tend to agree with that, because even if like a Patreon total comes out to like, let's say 500 grand, like ContraPoints' Patreon probably comes around to something like 500, somewhere around there. That's pre-tax income. So post-tax, if let's say it's 500, that probably comes down to like 350. And then you're paying people who work for her, because I know that she has people who work for her, I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken. So she's paying people who work for her, and then she's also paying for costs of, items and production costs, because she does a lot of, her videos are essentially like mini movie type of things. So, probably comes down to like 150, 200, which is a good amount of money, but that's not something that's like eating the rich. You're eating the rich over, 150Kers a year, not the people you're, eating the rich over. You're not going to go eat pharmacists and stuff like that. But you've also got to understand that the way in which they make their money is also like, this sort of voluntary thing, and it's like, you could argue they're being compensated for their labor type of thing, because the main sort of concern is that, there's labor exploitation by billionaires, etc., etc., which if you have a Patreon page and people are voluntarily giving their money to you, because that's how they value your labor, then kind of is what it is. This just seems to be a big waste of time. And I unfortunately, it seems like Dusty's channel has kind of been on the downtrend, and I think that he's looking at the other channels and he's just like, he's wishes that were him. I think he wants to sort of route those other people to his channel. And it's a little bit sad to watch, to be honest with you, because it's just such a useless thing to bring up. And what a random thing to bring up. It's just so useless, and it's this weird nitpicking thing where it's not a problem, and especially when you've got like another side that exists. Definitely seems to be a very weird thing. So not particularly happy with this, I guess.